Thanks, Neil, and thanks to the Presidential Precinct. It's really a fantastic organization and great to see how it has grown over the last several years to become really a preeminent entity in bringing international leaders, emerging leaders from around the world here to Virginia. I'm currently in Northern Virginia, so just north of Charlottesville, where Neil and the team are located, and have really enjoyed the opportunity to participate both in exchange programs on campus at William & Mary, at the University of Virginia, Montpellier, Monticello, all of the institutions part of the precinct, and look forward again to joining those programs in person. But for today, virtually, to have this conversation with you. And perhaps at one of the most challenging moments in our lifetime, I've, as Neil mentioned in my biography, certainly seen conflict. I've seen these kinds of pandemics, but never on the scale that we are currently confronting. My work, both as a diplomat on the National Security Council under President Obama, as well now in crisis communications consulting, really focuses on how do you develop, whether it's for you individually as a leader, for your team, for your organization or company, even across sectors or society, the kinds of capabilities, not just to respond to crisis. I like to say when you're responding to crisis, you're already in a position that is not advantageous. What I'd like to talk about today is how amidst adversity, we can actually become much more agile and emerge from these kinds of challenges stronger and even more successful. So let's get into the slides, and I'll take you first into the White House Situation Room, where this notion of counter-crisis communications began. Neil, we can go to the next slide. And we were confronting at the time two civil wars in Africa, South Sudan, Central African Republic. Russia decided to invade Crimea in the Ukraine, as well as the emergence of ISIS. Yet all of these vulnerabilities, civil wars in Africa, Russia meddling on its borders, extremist groups in the Middle East, were vulnerabilities that we should have addressed, identified ahead of time. And so one of the key lessons that I took away from that, and that we actually started a process within the National Security Council to focus on, is how, in understanding from a communication standpoint, what are our most likely and our most damaging vulnerabilities. In that case, it was global threats, but it can equally apply to a company or organization that understands what their threats are. And then against those threats, starting to put in place both the indicators that will give you that early warning, as well as the infrastructure that you need to have in place to respond. And finally, this concept, which we'll get into at the end, of countermeasures. So today, we're just going to briefly familiarize you with some of these terms and concepts, and then glad to have an exchange about them. So Neil, we can move on to the next slide. And as we begin this discussion, what I'd like to ask each of you to really reflect on are the vulnerabilities that you know exist. They could be personal ones, something you said, something you did, something that you were accused of. But if it should become a full-fledged scandal, are you ready to respond? Do you have the elements in place to explain yourself, to tell the story in a way that puts it in a constructive context? Similarly, as an institution, you know that there are parts of your organization, whether it's a government entity, a non-government entity, a company, that just don't work right. And everybody ignores it. Everybody, hopes that it will get better or go away. But at the end of the day, we really have to confront those challenges. We have to confront those gears that are squeaky and just not functioning in the way that they were designed to, because they too can really become the next crisis. They can be exacerbated and really create massive problems. And then in the last sense, we have everything outside of our organization. The health pandemics, obviously, that we are all so familiar with at the moment, security issues, the cyber challenges. And so I like to describe the modern era as one in which risk has gone regular. We go back to the power of the individual. Today, anyone with a cell phone has enormous power to capture photos, videos, to even share, views that can transform society either in a constructive way or in a chaotic way.